have you been in a situation of extreme desperation and
Right.
vulnerability where your family and friends are relying on you, or your life is relying on the decisions that you're making?
Right.
Most of us
Have
probably
not.
know.
All right. Well, hey, friends, and welcome back to the Empowered Life podcast. This is a space where we believe that God uses ordinary people like me and like you to do extraordinary things. And so today, during Human Trafficking Awareness Month, we are stepping into a conversation that is for every single one of us. We all need to hear this. And friends, the reality of trafficking is heartbreaking, but we cannot look away from it. Turning a blind eye to this only allows this to continue and to grow more and more. So we have got to look it square in the face, understand what is trafficking and how can we be a part of the solution. Because the truth is, right now, while you're listening to this conversation, it is estimated that over 49 million people around the world are being bought and sold against their will. This is happening in every single region of the world, and it can happen to anyone. It is all around us, but it is hidden. It is fast growing, it is complex, and it's estimated to be generating $236 billion every year. And research shows that the leading risk factor in almost all of these cases is vulnerability. So traffickers prey on vulnerable people in order to recruit and exploit them as their victims. And there's no population that's more vulnerable than a child. And it is estimated that 1 in 4 victims of trafficking are children. And that is not because they've done anything wrong. They just often lack the protection and the support and the knowledge they need in order to stay safe. But it doesn't have to be that way. There is something we can do to protect these children before the exploitation ever begins. And that is what today's conversation is about. It's about prevention. How can we stop this from ever happening in the first place? So, to guide this conversation, I'm joined by my friend and someone who has committed her life to human trafficking prevention. So, Steph Jones is the head of prevention and education at A21, and she has spent over 15 years in the humanitarian and child protection field all around the globe. So, Steph and A21 are on a mission to eradicate human trafficking, and they are committed to this fight until freedom becomes a reality for everyone, everywhere. That's the mission. And one of the ways that they're doing that is by equipping people like you and I, equipping parents and teachers and mentors and partners like Allies and Youth Development with research based tools in order to keep our kids safe. So, Steph has seen firsthand how vulnerability places children at risk, and she has helped develop prevention strategies that truly work. And so, today she's here to help us understand the urgency for prevention and also what we can do right now to keep children safe. So let's jump in. And Steph, I'm so excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so we've known each other for several years
Mhm.
now. And I think my first impression of you is like you're the smartest friend I have. And to all my friends watching, I'm sorry, but you're just a genius. But equal to your intelligence is your passion for what you do. And I'm just honored to be your friend and to
Mm.
get to know you. And I want our listeners to get to see a glimpse of that too. So before we kind of jump into what we're going to talk about today, why don't you tell us what first drew you into this work? And yeah, like what kind of got that conviction that you have in your heart for prevention?
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me
Yeah,
here. That's very kind of you to say.
that's true.
I mean, I would say I probably got drawn into just the field of humanitarian work
Hmm.
and poverty alleviation as a teenager. Back in Australia, another organization came to our school well before A21 was
Hmm.
established because I'm that old.
No, you're not. If you're that old, then I'm like,
A little bit older.
yeah.
But they came when I was in 10th grade.
Hmm.
And I remember they started sharing about this issue of children living in poverty and having to eat ground up bark and just things that I was somewhat aware of because our mother raised us in a way to, understand things going
Hmm.
around the world. But I guess my eyes were opened and they came into the school doing a young leadership program and really investing and encouraging in young children and
Hmm.
youth to be the next generation of change makers.
Wow.
And so I went to this little summit that they had and just felt completely impacted by what they did. And so I continued to go for the next couple of years, be an advocate. It was for World Vision.
Hmm.
And so be an advocate. And when it came time to decide what I wanted to study, up until that point, I wanted to do music. I wanted to teach, at a high school or something like that. And I
Hmm.
just changed my mind. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm going to study human rights and ethics and human services, child protection.
Right.
I want to get involved.
Hmm.
And so that kind of started me on the path academically. And at the same time, I was volunteering with World Vision and just loving what I did. And then at a conference, I heard Chris Kane speak about A21, this new thing that she was starting
Hmm.
in Greece. And I remember going, part of my family are Greek. I go to Greece.
Mhm.
I just got back from Greece. It's meant to be.
Yeah.
And I was so pumped because I'm like, this is going to happen. I'm going to totally moved by what she's talking about the issue of human trafficking and exploitation.
Were
And I
you
have
aware of it up until that point?
no,
No, that was your first exposure.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think I would have been 19 or
Yeah.
20. And I knew, like I said, I knew about poverty and injustices around the world. I did not know about human trafficking.
Mm.
And so I just thought, I'm training for this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so ready.
Mhm.
And it didn't happen.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, maybe that's not what was meant to happen.
Yeah.
And so at university, I continued to study, focusing on trafficking
Mhm.
prevention. I went over to Thailand for the first time and kind of got to see different elements of injustice in vulnerable communities and thought, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to be over
Mhm.
here. I want to be working in this space. And again, it wasn't going to happen with A21 at that time
Mhm.
because A21 didn't have a presence in Southeast Asia.
Mhm.
And I knew that's where I was called to go.
Yeah.
And then I ran into, like, met some of the A21 team in
Mhm.
Sydney in
Mhm.
Australia. And in that connection, I started to volunteer, doing research.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, I ended up kind of being around at the right time in the right place when our Thailand office was being established.
Mhm.
And one of the team just said, like, what are your thoughts? Do you want to
Mhm.
come over and work and help set up prevention in Thailand? And
Mhm.
I was already planning to move back. I was probably going to try and get a job with World Vision
Mhm.
in Thailand. And so, yeah, like, okay, let's
Yeah.
go.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So your passion was always kind of geared more towards prevention,
Mhm.
and so assume the more you were there, you were just exposed to more, and that kind of deepened your conviction.
Yeah, I think for me a huge chunk of it is when I moved over to Thailand
Mhm.
and I'd been going for a couple of years already.
Mhm.
I just saw some of the poverty in the region, not just in that nation, but the neighboring nations. And
Right.
I just thought, I don't understand why this continues to happen.
Right.
Are people not aware of it? Like
Mhm.
what's going on? And then for me, when I was starting with A21, I also started to talk to partners in the region and figure out, like, okay, how can we get involved? Like, what can we do? What can we build out?
Right.
And our aftercare team, our social workers, were working with children, like cases, survivors as young as 18 months old.
Mm.
And the prevention materials available at the time, not just in Thailand, but globally, were really targeted at adults,
Mhm.
women in the sex industry, maybe teenagers.
Mhm.
It was not like, this is not a topic you talk about with children. And this is
Mhm.
not something that you were running in primary school or elementary school,
Right. Yeah. Wow.
but the need was there.
Yeah.
And I guess at the time, I remember my thought and with the team just going, we want to go in and help talk about an issue and prevent the issue and raise this awareness, but we're starting at an age where children are already trafficked.
Mm.
They know what it is. They know
Mhm.
what their families have experienced or what they've experienced firsthand. We're actually too late.
Mm.
And that kind of took me on this journey, with A21 of, okay, what can we create for children?
Right.
And that's just a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, we definitely need programs and resources for restoration
Hmm.
once the trauma has occurred, but
Yeah.
we don't, yeah, what can we do to prevent it from ever taking place in the first place? And I'm sure seeing that just, yeah, just fueled you even more. So, one question that I've been asked before, and I haven't seen half of what you have already, but how do you stay hopeful when you are seeing the magnitude of this problem and just the darkness of it?
Yeah. I think that's a good question. My role is so different, I think, to, our team that work
Mm-hmm.
directly with survivors day in, day out. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think they might have a very different answer.
Mm-hmm.
I get to work on the side where we hear, you know, I I saw this and that opened my
Mm-hmm.
eyes to this issue, or I thought this might have been happening to someone and then I saw this material, or we were in a class and we heard about this. And I guess I get to engage more on the side of hope, of
Hope.
people,
Yeah.
yeah, of
Mm-hmm.
people hearing about the issue for the first time and going,
Mm-hmm.
okay, what can
Mm-hmm.
I do? How can I give? And some of the
Yeah.
most wonderful stories of that have involved, teenagers being so passionate about the cause that they've invited me to come into a school
Mm-hmm.
and build relationship with that school, and a decade later that school is giving.
Mm.
We're just their regular charity now, but it
Right.
started because someone is super passionate,
Yeah.
a young person's passionate.
Right.
And I think when you see that and you get to see the passion of people and the drive that people have to bring prevention messages to their communities
Mm-hmm.
and speaking about how it's impacting, yeah, I think that kind of drives it
Yeah.
more so than like I said.
Yeah, if you were on the other side of it. And I'm sure the more stories you hear of survivors, that just
Mhm,
fuels you even more. And we've got to keep going and keep
100%.
keep educating and bring this to more communities. And I really believe that everyone listening in the majority of the world deeply cares and
Mhm,
wants to protect kids.
yeah,
But I still think there is a lot of lack of understanding when it comes to human trafficking and what it really is.
mhm,
And so I kind of want us to start with bringing awareness and
mhm,
clarity. So give us like a quick human trafficking 101. What is and I know that's a trick question almost because it looks so different
mhm.
depending on where you are in the world, but how would you describe it for our listeners?
Yeah, good
Not
question.
just describe human trafficking, but like the reality of the problem.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a good question.
Mhm.
Without boring everyone on a couple-hour lecture, because I know we don't have time, I would say some people will describe human trafficking as a form of modern-day slavery.
Mhm.
When we're speaking with children, we'll talk about it in a way that you don't have rights over your own body, over your own actions, your movement, when and where you eat or sleep, what you're forced to do, or you're forced to work and maybe you made the decision to work in this particular field. However, the conditions that you agreed to work under are not at all what you've signed
Yep,
up for.
right.
And that could be you think you've landed your dream job and then suddenly you're not getting paid for it. You are not being reimbursed.
Mhm.
Often when we're talking with children, we'll play a game using candy. I
Mhm.
ask them to do an activity
Mhm.
and in return I will give them some candy. And then they
Mhm.
do it. I'm like, no, do it again, do it again, do it
Mhm.
again.
Mhm.
And
Just to
they realize,
illustrate it.
mhm.
Mhm.
And they realize quickly the frustration. And that, very simply is what human trafficking is. It's when you have no free agency
Mhm.
over what is happening in your life and you don't have the ability to leave. And it's not always, though sometimes it's not locked and chained away and
Right.
physically trapped. And that is the reality for some people. But for a lot of people, it's emotional,
Mhm.
it's psychological. It is the fear of retribution to their families. If you leave, we will go and harm
Mhm.
people that you love.
Mhm.
And so people end up, getting stuck in this cycle.
Mhm.
And some people get stuck because of poverty
Right.
and because of lack of job opportunities. And so if they leave, their family aren't going to eat. Or maybe their child can't go to school. And for some people, there's an element of shame. They've taken a labor job, for example, to provide for their family. And
Mhm.
instead, they've been beaten and abused. And when it's time for them to leave, they feel shame because they have nothing to show for their time. But
Right.
they've also been abused in ways that they maybe don't want to speak about. And
Mhm.
so there's so many layered
Mhm.
elements of human trafficking,
Mhm.
but ultimately it is someone is being forced
Yeah.
or tricked
Mhm.
or coerced in a way to do something that is maybe slave like practices, exploitation, whether it's sex or
Mhm.
for labor. It could be a digital form,
Mhm.
exploitation online,
Mhm.
where there's some commercial element. So
Mhm.
money is being exchanged or not
Right.
exchanged.
Well, I want us to talk a little bit about vulnerability because I know I mentioned it earlier, but that's kind of the common thread that's running throughout it. And at Allies, what we're seeing is in many orphanages around the world, kids are aging out of the orphanages at sometimes as early as 15. And these orphanages they're providing basic needs, shelter and food, but there's a lot of times not much beyond that. So they're not entering into the world um, ready to be independent. And so in many areas, the life expectancy is 30 due to substance abuse, suicide, and trafficking. And so that's what our mentors are passionate about is stepping into those spaces to reduce the vulnerability. And so explain a little bit more about that whole vulnerability cycle and how that relates to trafficking.
Yeah, another good question. I think when it comes to vulnerability, there are factors in the public health space. We'd call it social determinants of health. And so you think about how do these different elements impact your daily well-being and livelihood and ability to live a good and healthy life. And so you think about education, um, income,
Hmm.
family support networks, health and access to medicine, the political and social elements. So to kind of give examples, if you're living in a community that is incredibly poor,
Hmm.
you lack access to basic health care and food and water or consistent access to this. Uh, Job opportunities are really scarce, so maybe you have to travel a lot longer than what you would have hoped,
Hmm.
which is another cost. And so maybe you can't come back and forth. Maybe you do have to go away. Um, if you have a sick family member and you're having to pay to get medication, but you don't have that, people are taking money, they're going into debt and then become indebted for life. And that's, there's all these different elements where I think sometimes we take it for granted. Okay, I don't feel well or I need this. I tap a card. To be honest, I tap my phone. I'm not even pulling out a card anymore. And we can get the needs that we want immediately. And that's not the reality for a lot of people. And when basic necessities are scarce or you're stretched so thin to access what should just be a basic human right, you end up becoming you end up being vulnerable to a lot of other aspects. And so you think if you have an employer or a trafficker who's like, you know what, I want to exploit someone, so I'm going to offer you a job. I know that you're desperate. I know that you need money. I know that you're not going to say no. I'm going to offer you this job. I know that you're going to have to travel for it, maybe across the country, maybe to a different country. When you travel to a different country, you become vulnerable just in your visa status. You know, you have to have a passport. That's expensive. That costs money. If you don't have that or the appropriate visa, you'll go in a regular fashion, which would be crossing the border in a different way.
Right.
So then you don't have legal status in the country you're in. So now you don't have money. So you're reliant on this job. You have an illegal or irregular status in that country, and your boss decides they're not going to pay you. Well, what are you going to do? If I'm not getting paid, I can make a complaint. I could hire a lawyer. I could get HR involved. If those things don't exist and you don't have legal status in a country, your boss is going to say, so what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Exactly. And so that puts you in another area of vulnerability. And then you're thinking about, okay, well, I have family that are relying on me back home. So maybe I'm just not getting paid this week or next week, or maybe it's coming the following week. So that's false promises. And that's the deception side of human trafficking. And so when you marry all of this together, there are vulnerabilities, which I know some people I've heard over the years, well, why didn't they just leave? Or why did they take that job in the first place? Or, it's so clear in hindsight for people hearing a story. Why this, why that? And you're like, have you been in a situation of extreme desperation and vulnerability where your family and friends are relying on you, or your life is relying on the decisions that you're making?
Right.
Most of us probably know.
Yeah.
And so people make decisions and they make, they make decisions that maybe for them is the only decision.
They don't see another way.
They don't see another way.
Yeah.
And so when you think about that, and then you suddenly become fully reliant on, okay, whatever they're doing. Some employers, I'm talking about forced labor right now, there's other forms of trafficking. Some employers will take the person's passport or papers as security that they don't, run away with equipment or break something, or so they can't even freely leave, even if you have papers. And so it just becomes this area of
They're trapped.
They're trapped. And that's what I was saying before. It's not physical chains. They could be trapped because what is the other option?
Right.
If I go to the authorities right now and say, my employer has my papers and they are not paying me, and then the employer goes, sure, here's their papers. They're not here legally.
Right.
That person could be detained, not even deported. And I'm talking about multiple countries around the world, not just in the US specifically. I'm talking about some countries you could be indefinitely detained until you're able to pay the the bill to get out. And that's, you have no money.
Right.
Your family don't have money.
Right.
And so there are other risks that are just as dire. And sometimes people, they take a much bigger risk than what seems rational to other people. But like I said, if you're not in the situation,
You don't know.
you don't know.
You haven't been in that. And I know when it comes to the vulnerability of children, it's a whole nother level. So let's talk specifically about what that looks like.
Yeah. So children, if you think about some of the vulnerability factors I was talking about, like health and education and employment and income, when you think about children, under the age of 18, around the world, you're considered a child. And so you have unique rights and you have different rights because you have unique vulnerabilities that require an adult or to help and take care of you. And so if you don't have a solid support system, or you have a support system that is struggling, for example, you're coming from a poor family and everybody has to work. And once you reach a certain age, you too have to work. I mean, that's where you end up seeing vulnerability of children working in forced labor because they're working at really young ages. For some industries, children have smaller hands, smaller arms. They can crawl into spaces that adults can't. Lots of children are quite energetic. They can go and work longer hours. And, I think, again, when it comes to that vulnerability, if you don't have money, you're not in school, which is another thing. Education is free in many places around the world. But I think or the access is, I think what people forget is, okay, well, how do you get there if you don't have transportation or
Right.
money for transportation? Or how do you get there if your parents have to work and there are younger siblings at home that need to be taken care of?
Right.
That might fall on a child. Or maybe you have a disability. You have a different learning abilities that your local school doesn't cater for. When you're thinking about different countries around the world as well, there can be other barriers to accessing school. That means if a child's not at school, they're at home. And it's very unlikely that they're going to be at home with their parents looking after them and homeschooling. If poverty is the factor there,
Right.
they're probably home alone. And when you're home alone, that can lead to more vulnerabilities because you're essentially having to live like an adult,
Right.
you're having to take care of yourself. And so you think about perpetrators and traffickers that coming and they want to, they're not coming with good intention.
Right.
Again, there's the whole grooming side of things where
Yeah.
they're like, look, I'm here to help. And so in some of the nations that we work, someone will come to a community and say, I can offer scholarship or I can offer employment specifically for kids. Like, don't worry, it's safe. I know years ago, our team worked with a family, and the person, the guardian that signed the contract for these children to go abroad didn't realize what they were signing because they were illiterate. And again, that's another vulnerability. If you're asked to sign things and agree to things and do all of this without knowledge of the language, ability to read, low literacy, understanding of all these different things, you can sign up for employment that you weren't expecting.
Right.
And I guess to be fair, I know for Australia, where I'm from, I started working at 14 and a half, which I think is the legal age. It's not like it's not normal for children to help in a family
Right.
business or to work at a younger age before they're 18. I think the vulnerability factor that kind of opens children up to trafficking and exploitation is when the job opportunities are so limited that the job itself is exploitative. But there is either a lack of understanding of what the exploitation is because it is a cultural norm. Everybody works. My mother worked at this age, somebody before her, the grandmother worked at this age.
Right.
It's normal, so I did it. That can be sometimes the lack of awareness.
Right.
Other times it's that desperation because the family need income.
Right.
And yeah, I think when children aren't in school, that can open them up to that additional vulnerability
Right.
because they are not in a safer place.
Right.
And even after school, children that maybe run around on the streets and have to look after themselves, I think it can be really difficult for them as well in any country, not just in trafficking, but to stay out of trouble.
Right.
I mean, there's lots of studies that show after school programs help reduce that simply by keeping kids busy.
Right.
So it does open a vulnerability, just lacking support.
I mean, it is so complex and there's so much to it. And I think it's just opening my eyes even more about how important it is that we're educating kids, because you and I as adults who, have had life experience and we've had people teach us and educate us, and some of this is common sense, and or you have this gut feeling and you just know, but for so many kids that don't have advocates in their life that are, pointing them in that direction, they're extremely susceptible to perpetrators. So one thing I wanted to ask you is about common misconceptions, because I know there are a lot of them, and I feel like you've kind of already hit on some because you're talking about different kinds of trafficking as far as like labor trafficking, and I think most people assume it's just sex trafficking. Which, am I correct to state that that's the primary form of trafficking, is sex trafficking?
I would probably say it's labor trafficking.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So here in the U.S., it would probably be more,
It's
or still.
it's still both because labor covers so many elements, and labor is also often undetected.
Okay.
So sex trafficking is an enormous form and definitely a majority form of human trafficking. But forced labor is pretty big.
It's prominent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some misconceptions that you think we need to kind of pop? We need to, yeah. I don't know why I said pop. Maybe we can edit that out. That didn't make sense. But what was I trying to say? Like just myths, like mythbusters. That's what I was looking for.
Some mythbusters.
Yeah.
I'll preface this by saying there are so many forms of trafficking, and the most horrendous story you've heard is likely true. But is it the most common?
Right.
And we're talking about people's lives and their experiences, and there's no such thing as an experience worse than someone else's because it's their lived experience.
That's right.
So I want to preface that. Some of the biggest myths around human trafficking, misconceptions even, is that it is only happening to women and girls in the sex industry. But that is true, and there's a huge percentage, and too many. One person is too many.
Yeah.
So this happens, and it happens all the time. And so I wouldn't say it's a myth. I would say that the misconception is that's where it stops. Because when you say that or believe that, you automatically exclude boys and men, and you exclude other forms of human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
You exclude entire populations and their lived experiences, which are horrific as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it can be difficult for people to understand how forced labor could be worse than experiencing sexual exploitation.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's somebody's lived experience. They haven't had freedom to make their own choices, to
Right.
leave. They have been, held in slave-like situations.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are movies like Taken, even a more recent one, can't remember the name.
Sound of Freedom.
Sound of Freedom. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sound of Freedom. These movies are not inaccurate in that this maybe has never happened.
Right.
But I think when movies that are a little bit more extreme
Mm-hmm.
or sensationalized,
Yeah.
or just show the worst possible form of trafficking, I think it sets in people's minds, if it's not that, it's not trafficking.
Yeah. So you're constantly looking for somebody to jump out of a van and take you. And if you don't see that, then there's not trafficking happening here.
Yeah, and kidnap you. And I know, I mean, I've heard many times people worried about the white van.
Yeah.
I lived in Thailand, and a white van is how you get around quite a lot.
Yeah.
And so I used to laugh. I was like, look, if you're going to be panicked every time you see a white van,
Yeah.
I'm like, you're going to live in a state of panic
fear
while you're
all the
here.
time. Right.
I'm like, it. People do get kidnapped. People do
Yeah.
get abducted. People do are in chains. Like, this happens.
Mm-hmm.
But also, people can apply for a job, and they can go travel for that job, and they can think they can do everything without being kidnapped or taken.
Yeah.
And they get there and everything's changed.
Mm-hmm.
What they were told they were going to get paid, or even if they get paid, what the job was.
Mm-hmm.
People might apply for a job as a secretary, and then they're forced to be a sex worker.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
this happens too. And so when you have this sensitized, sensationalized, view, you are essentially saying, well, their experience isn't trafficking. If you have to be kidnapped to be trafficked, if you're not kidnapped, you're not trafficked. Or you have to be a victim of sexual exploitation to be trafficked, or a woman or a girl. That means that a boy who is trafficked into the fishing industry for forced labor, what is their experience?
Right.
So I wouldn't say they're myths so much as how we speak about issues actually impacts how we're able to tackle these issues, because awareness and prevention, like we're speaking about, is such a huge element. And when everyone is misinformed, even a slight little bit, it can mean that we overlook populations. And even in funding, there might be less funding going towards helping people who are forced into labor, fruit picking, compared to other areas. And that actually does impact the ability for those people to see freedom, to get the services that they need.
Yeah.
Don't know if that answered your question.
No, 100%. Because I think if we don't know what we're looking for, then we are going to miss it. And in thinking about, the work that our mentors are doing, if they're only talking to the girls and they're only warning them of sex trafficking, then we're going to miss a huge, vulnerability that all of the kids are open to, and, false job opportunities and labor trafficking. And so, thank you for just opening our eyes more to the need and the problem. So let's talk about prevention. And I think, awareness has to be step one. We have to know what we're looking for, but what do we do and how do we stop it? So I know early intervention is probably the best, the most proactive tool we have. So talk to me a little bit about what that looks like.
Yes, definitely.
Because you said earlier that sometimes we're too late. Like, is there an age that's too late, or too early? I mean, can we start at a super young age, and what does that look like?
Yeah. So I think answering your last question first, yes, you can start talking to very young children about their rights in child-friendly, age-appropriate ways. Letting them know that their body is their body, and certain people shouldn't be allowed to touch it, and there are certain parts of their body that they cannot be touched, and that they can say no to different things, and who is a trusted person versus who's a tricky person.
Right.
These are like foundational things that will set them up to recognize what exploitation, human trafficking is when they're old enough, and their agency to say, okay, just because you're an adult doesn't mean,
that you don't have rights. Yeah.
yeah.
And I love how you said a trusted versus tricky person. So unpack that a little bit, because I know that's a newer almost mindset.
Yeah. So we at A21, as well as just in child protection in general, are shifting to say trusted versus tricky, in addition to stranger danger,
Mm-hmm.
purely because statistically, children are abused by people they know.
Mm.
And so, again, it's like that misconception. If we only teach children to look out for the scary stranger
Mm-hmm.
and trust the people you know,
Yeah.
then
Their
they can
guard is
be,
down.
their
Mm-hmm.
guard can be down. They can
Mm-hmm.
be abused because, uncle so and so, they are a trusted person. So if
Mm-hmm.
they're doing this, it must be trusted.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was running one of our prevention programs in Thailand, and I was with kids, and we asked the same question. Let's say Mark is helping his nephew do X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd ask the children, okay, Mark is helping his nephew, but the actual situation itself is unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
When I asked them, do you think it's safe or unsafe? For a while, 50% of every class I was going into would say it's safe. And when I
Because
would
of
ask,
the person.
because, well, Mark is their uncle, like
Mm-hmm.
if it's his nephew. And I remember this being a really pivotal moment for me in writing programs
Mm-hmm.
of going, okay, we need to be targeting the action of a person.
Mm.
Is it a trusted action or are they being tricky?
Mm.
So, yes, we do talk about strangers and we will talk about, don't get into a car with a stranger, don't accept certain things from a stranger. Like that is fine. Also,
Mm-hmm.
around people you know, are their actions trusted? Are they safe? Do they make you feel comfortable? Are they asking you to keep a secret that would bring joy? So it's a safe secret?
Mm-hmm.
Or would you be in trouble or someone be upset if you told them?
Mm.
And so, having a surprise birthday party for my friend Meredith,
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah.
That's a safe secret.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody asking, I'm going to touch you. It's going to be our special secret. This is, uncle, aunt, family member,
Mm-hmm.
friend.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a safe secret.
Mm-hmm.
What they're doing is tricky.
Right.
And so when we say, are they trusted or tricky, we're asking and we're teaching children to look at the situation,
Mm-hmm.
not just the person, because it is human
Mm-hmm.
and natural to go, this is my kin and I trust them.
Mm-hmm.
This is the friend of this person and I trust them. I
Right.
mean, we all do it day
Yeah.
in, day out. If you recommended someone to me
You
because they,
instantly trust them. Yeah.
exactly, whether
Mm-hmm.
I know them or not. And so when they do something a little bit dodgy,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You can't just blindly trust. But
Right.
children are kind of taught.
So, like, out of respect or honor,
Mhm.
to just trust and go with an adult.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why the trusted and tricky has come around to
Mm-hmm.
more talk about actions and really just try. And that's age appropriate. It's a way you can talk about quite a difficult topic
Mm-hmm.
to younger children.
Right.
That's very basic. And then as you get older, you can
Mm-hmm.
bring in more of the actual
Mm-hmm.
concepts. I would say, going back to your first question about prevention,
Mm-hmm.
just general, um, again, in public health, there's a thing called upstream approach. So if you think about a river, I'm not going to butcher it, I don't think, but
I wouldn't know if you did, but no, you'll do it.
somebody
Yeah.
out there
Yeah.
listening, no, it's kind of a story that many people have told in the public health space. But essentially, if you're down the bottom of a river and you keep seeing children like floating down the river and they're drowning,
Mm-hmm.
you jump in and save them,
Right.
right? That's your immediate action is how can I help? What can I do? How can I rescue? Like what I go into immediate,
Right.
I've got to do something. Now, if it's one child, everyone can do this.
Yeah.
Two children, okay, maybe if there are two people. Three, like how many people are at the bottom of a river? When you start having child after child after child after child in this illustration coming to the bottom of this river and drowning, at some point you have to walk upstream
Yeah.
and you have to go see what is happening.
Yeah.
Where are they coming from?
Right. Let's stop them before they get in the water.
Let's stop them before they get in the water. So if you walk upstream in this illustration, kids are playing soccer or football at the top of a hill that is right beside a river and they keep falling in because, it's right where they're scoring goals.
Mm-hmm.
What would you do?
Mm.
And if you're listening, like think, what would you do?
Yeah.
Put a fence,
Right.
put a warning sign, put an adult there, talk to them about the risks of going too close to the edge of the river.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to them that right where we are, there's a really strong current. It doesn't look like it's a dangerous thing,
Mm-hmm.
but
Let me
it's
tell you
dangerous.
what's happening. Yeah.
Let me tell
Mm-hmm.
you what's happening. Because putting a fence at the top of a river or at the top of a cliff or at the top of the issue
Mm-hmm.
will drastically reduce the issue down the bottom, which is the deadly part of children drowning.
Mm.
And so when you think about human trafficking, you think about exploitation, we need everybody working in the aftercare sector and we need people working with survivors and we need that. We need the legal system, the justice system. It's all
Mm-hmm.
essential. What we also need is for people to not even be trafficked, not even
Yeah.
reach that point
Mm-hmm.
because lives are completely destroyed
Right.
through human trafficking.
Yeah.
And so how much sweeter if we could actually stop someone from ever being
Right.
exploited or trafficked.
Yeah.
And to do that is not as simple as let's just build a fence.
Mm-hmm.
However, the idea of prevention is okay, let's talk about it. Let's raise awareness. let's look at some of the key factors. And so if poverty is a key factor, what's poverty alleviation? Let's go in and help build up communities so that they are not struggling to find income. If education is a factor, let's get everybody in school. Let's, educate the community on what issues are. If health is a factor, I know I said, a little bit ago, maybe you have a really sick family member and you have to take out a loan and go into debt to help them. Maybe that needs to be something that is reconsidered because everybody should have access to healthcare and it should be affordable and something that is not sending you into debt.
Right.
So that is another thing. So you kind of look at it as a holistic public health approach. How can we address all of these tiny little elements that don't necessarily seem like they impact human trafficking, but they do.
Yeah, they do. I love that analogy so much.
It's a cool
Of
one.
yes, of just positioning different people
Mm-hmm.
along that. And yeah, best case scenario is that you're out of a job one day
That's my
because
goal.
that we've stopped it. And
Yeah.
I know that that is what we believe is possible with more awareness and more prevention. And I'm sure that you have seen stories where this actually is working, where going into a school or a community and educating them is saving lives.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share some of that?
Yeah, I can. I'll share a couple, not in too much detail, but
Yeah.
we around the world, our teams, networks, volunteers, partners will run programs in schools, in community groups, sometimes just out in the community on streets. And one of the things that we see really, really help when it comes to prevention is not just, okay, target this program to this child. It's actually, like I said before, it's holistic. Everybody in that community, from the parent to the teacher to the child to the law enforcement, understanding what the issue is and knowing how to respond. There was a case in America where educators had been trained and the school counselors had been trained on what the issue was. So keep in mind, you have people in the school already equipped. They know what they're going to do if ever this situation arises. So when a prevention lesson is being taught in the school, there's a child, a teenager who realizes pretty quickly, everything that you're telling me in these scenarios sounds pretty familiar. It sounds like this might be happening to me. And so that child goes up to someone who's been trained and self discloses exploitation. They don't know that's what it is. They're not sure, but they've felt empowered in that lesson because they have a voice. They have the right to say no. These are the basic values and
Yeah.
rights that are designed for children and teenagers. And if this isn't happening, it's not okay.
Right.
That's taught. So this child hears this. They go to someone who's trained and they say, I think this is happening to me. This person immediately goes, yeah,
I know what to do.
I know what to do. Contacts the police, local law enforcement. They're trained. They know what they're doing. They immediately go into action. In this particular case, there was a perpetrator interacting with this child online, and they were en route to actually come and meet with them, and they were intercepted. And they were intercepted. In this case, it was because it was online. They had 2 terabytes of child abuse material, sexual abuse material on their on a hard drive,
Wow.
and they were tried and prosecuted and received a sentence for that.
Wow.
That's one
Yeah.
situation.
And
Another,
that was a situation where this lesson was being taught in the hopes of prevention, but it ended up turning into a self-identification.
yeah,
Wow.
and honestly, that happens a lot.
Right.
Whether it's a self-identifying human trafficking or exploitation, sometimes people come up and they'll talk about a sexual abuse encounter that they've had, or it could just be bullying. It could be something that they've just kind of their eyes have been open to. Okay,
Yeah.
this isn't okay.
You're
And you've
putting
just
words to experiences they've had that
yeah,
they haven't been able to
yeah,
articulate for themselves.
yeah. And in addition to those words, we're saying there are trusted adults in your life, whether they're a parent or a guardian, a family friend, or a teacher or a police officer. There are people who their entire job is to protect you. And if they hear any of these situations, they're going to go into, I got to help you mode. Like,
Yeah.
this is not okay.
Right.
And I think that also gives children as well as adults this thing of like, okay, I've been ignored because maybe the offender is someone in my family. Maybe it's someone who, I was going to say this before and I forgot, but I just remembered, like, if you've been abused your whole life and if you've been told you are worthless, you have no value, you are the scum of the earth
Yeah.
by everyone around you, and then someone else starts treating you that way, you know, this is
It's
your
par for
normal.
the course. Right.
And so when we start instilling, and not just us, when people start instilling, okay, no, you have value, you have rights, there are laws, not just like, oh, we think you're great. There are laws to protect against these things. Suddenly, children and adults, they're hearing something for the first time. Okay,
It's
this isn't
empowering.
okay. Yeah. And something can be done, which is why it's so important to have trained, like I keep saying holistic, but to have the social and community circles around these
Mm-hmm.
children, like teachers and social workers and counselors and law enforcement, to also be trained,
Mm-hmm.
because you would never want a child to self-disclose and someone be like, no, dismiss it, because why would you ever trust to self-disclose again? But another thing that's really important that I've seen is consistency in building rapport. And when it comes to seeing prevention work, for years, our team would go into the same community. They'd run a program with children. Part of that program was bringing nutritious food, because that's what we were doing at the time. And these children were hungry. And sometimes you have to meet a practical need and a physical need before you start teaching about prevention.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if I'm hungry and I've got to pay attention to something, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
And I'm never starving, like in a proper situation of
Right.
starving. So we need to address physical need.
Yeah.
And so our team were doing that, and they do it week in and week out. And at some point, as they're teaching about these prevention messages too, children started to trust them. And they trust because every week when they said they would show up, they would show up. They were there. They're listening. They are, building that trust and rapport. And after a certain period, children started to self-disclose. And I think maybe 11 cases of trafficking and exploitation came out over the years of that particular program that our team were able to physically help just because they were present.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, again, part of prevention that's so back to your very first question, why do I have hope and get excited, and how do I not get so sad, burn out from this, is these stories. When I go, we have so many people around the world, just in general, that are so passionate about keeping children safe, passionate about eradicating human trafficking in their lifetime. And they also are in the lives of children daily, because they're a teacher, or they're a mom, or they're a grandparent, or they work in a youth serving organization, or they work at a faith-based organization. Whatever it is, they're there. And so when they are able to start running programs, understand the indicators, know what to look for to identify, they're already, in most cases, a trusted adult.
Right.
I'm not saying that offenders also don't work and disguise themselves in these places, but they have this. They're there day in and day out. And that's something that I can't do. I'm
You don't have access to that many children to impact, but you can impact the teachers and the mentors and the leaders and the families.
Yeah. And they can see the changes. They can see, okay, someone that was so excited coming to school and sat at the front of the class and would always put their hand up and answer this, suddenly they're slinking back. They're falling asleep. They're showing up late. They seem like they're unwell. They seem afraid. You know, they have the relationship to go, are you okay?
Something seems off.
What's going on? Yeah. And like we were saying, that could be the conversation that needed to happen. Because no one else has asked them how they're doing. No one else has cared about their world or their life. In fact, the people that should are the ones exploiting them. And so somebody else noticing, being there, asking the question, and then walking the journey with them. I mean, that's something that people in their own communities, their own families can do much better than technical experts who know the content. You know, I can do it in my own family and friend group, but I can't do it in your family and friend group.
That's so powerful. And it's really about just putting the knowledge and the tools and the resources into their hands. So, because like you said, their presence is what makes the difference. We had a guest on not too long ago, and he actually works with different sports teams, and he was explaining what he does, and he said, I'm in the presence ministry. That's what I do. I just show up and I pour into people's lives and into the team's lives, and through that it builds trust, and this is when walls start coming down, and that's what our mentors are doing, and that's the teachers and the parents that you're referring to. And I think when we talk about the magnitude of human trafficking, and you hear a number like 49.6 right million people, it can feel so daunting. And how, like, if A21's mission is to abolish slavery everywhere forever, how is that possible? And I think the key is collaboration, and it's doing what you just said about equipping those who are on the front lines. And that's one thing I love about the work that A21 is doing is it's not just for you, that you guys have created some of the most incredible resources and material and done the research, and you're equipping those that are doing this work. And so let's talk a little bit about the power of collaborating and why that is really the solution here.
Yeah. I mean, collaboration is maybe my favorite thing.
Yeah.
It's up there with one of my favorite parts of my job, because, I mean, I'm Australian.
Yeah.
I live in America. I work with a global team, and my job is to create resource. I can make really cool things, but I cannot do it on my own, and I certainly cannot contextualize it to the local experiences, for example, of our team in Cambodia. I visited Cambodia. I didn't grow up there.
Yeah.
I don't know the languages and the nuances of culture there, just like I don't know that for South Africa.
Right.
But our local teams do, and our local partners do. In countries that we're not working, but we're seeing people being trafficked from into a country that we're working in, we need prevention in that country. But if we're not there, so for example, Ethiopia, we're not there, but we're seeing a lot of people being trafficked from Ethiopia into Southeast Asia, into scamming centers. It's so important to get the preventative message into Ethiopia.
Yeah.
It's the same in the US. If people are being trafficked into the US from somewhere else, where is that somewhere else?
Right.
And who is there? And so the collaboration side of that is to work with local experts. Again, in like the public health sector, we would say key stakeholders or gatekeepers, you know, to build trust and rapport in a community, you have to have access to that community. You need to be respected. I can't create something, go into somewhere that I've never been, give it and say, this will work, do it.
Right.
Why
Who
would
are you and why should I listen to you? Right.
Exactly. I don't want to do that. But also, if it happened in reverse to me, I'd be like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not listening to you.
Right.
So why would we expect anything different? Collaboration is doing our research, seeing who the experts and the local nonprofits are in that community, and not just local nonprofits, community groups, churches, different organizations. Like, who knows that community? Who knows the needs? Who understands what trafficking looks like in that community?
Right.
Because it looks different in every country around the world, in every city. Everyone's experience is different.
Right.
And so we really have to talk to people who are on the ground in different areas and different experts. Even within the programs that I create with the team, I'll talk to social workers, psychologists, teachers and educators, survivors who have lived experience. Every program that we do, we have someone who has been trafficked themselves review it, more than one,
Right.
because we want a lived experience perspective. You know, it's one
Right.
thing to say research says this,
Yeah.
and it's important that we say it this way. But if you've lived it, you are the expert. You know.
You know.
And so that's important. But the other side that's so important about collaboration is the ability to really push out the message. You know, Allies is in, what are you in, like
86
Okay,
countries.
you're
Yeah.
in 86 countries. We're not in 86 countries.
Mhm.
So even just being able to get resources into the hands of more vulnerable communities
Right.
and physically more people,
Right.
you know, the communities that you work with, I may never meet in my lifetime,
Right.
and vice versa.
Right.
And another local organization, and a local church, and a local youth serving organization. We all cater to different populations.
Right.
That's why we all exist.
Right.
And so collaboration and becoming like this global network of people who care for the protection of children just makes us this insanely
Force
powerful
to reckon with.
united force.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
It's and the model really does work. You know, whenever our founders first became aware of the issue that orphans around the world were facing, I mean, their hearts broke, but you know, they're here in Texas. What are we going to do? Like, how can we fix this problem? We can schedule trips and go on mission trips, but is that really going to bring the impact? And so that's where God really planted the vision of like, we have to empower local communities, the people who are living in those areas. Number one, they know the need, they know the vulnerabilities, they're invested, and they deeply care about their community. And so how can we empower them and equip them to be the change makers, and then being able to come alongside organizations like A21 and just strengthens us even more, you know?
Yeah. And I would say, sorry.
No, you go.
I was going to say, to add to that as well, it's a sustainable model.
Yeah.
That's the difference. I've seen it, whether it's nonprofits or different groups around the world. You can go in and you see it with fads. What's the cool thing to support? Where's the funding right now? You know, you can go into an area as, you know, myself. Okay, I'm not from America and I'm not here permanently. So why even try to set up something permanent? That's the thing. When you empower local communities, or you partner along local communities, local leaders, and you work together to figure out the problem at a local level, when you leave, the program doesn't die.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the big difference.
Yeah.
It's sustainable, because who loves my family more than me? Maybe my mom.
Yeah.
But
Right.
but you're not going to have the same vested interest in my family, and vice versa. So you probably don't have a massive passion for Brisbane.
Yeah.
Because
Well, I've never been there, but I
Not
might
yet.
after I come visit you.
But, you know, it's like,
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I want to see my city thrive. I want to see
Yeah.
my country thrive.
Right.
That's the same for everybody. You want to see your local community thrive more than
Yeah.
anyone else.
That's true.
And so by really partnering and collaborating with people locally, you're setting up a sustainable model that can live on, rather than fully reliant on funding from
Yeah.
outside,
Right.
or me physically being there. And
Yeah.
now I'm leaving, now the project dies. You know, that has happened too often
Mhm.
around the world, and that's not the most
Yeah.
sustainable model. So
Almost doing more harm than good
it
in
can,
that regard. Yeah.
definitely can.
I love the stories we hear from allies of different people in the community who are they don't know about allies yet, and then when they find out what we're doing, they're like, oh, we've been looking for someone like you.
Mhm.
We are our hearts are for the orphans, but we don't know what to do, and so that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Like they are already so passionate and invested and just need the equipping,
Yeah.
and it's so cool. So let's talk about what these resources are that you guys have created that is for the taking. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. Okay. Again, not to bore everyone, I'll go quick. Um, we have a range of free resources that are age appropriate for a range of different ages. They range from comic books and storybooks that are interactive to programs that you can run in a school or an informal school setting or with a community group, um, to safety guides.
Mm-hmm.
So I will start with maybe the more fun. They're all fun, but
Mm-hmm.
comic books and storybooks. It's so cool to have visual learning aids,
Mm-hmm.
not only for children, but for low literacy communities.
Yeah.
To tell a story without needing to read, I
Yeah.
mean, that's powerful.
Yeah.
So we have a storybook that's designed for 3 to 6 year olds.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we were talking about like how early can you start?
Yeah.
It's a great little story to read
Yeah.
with the young people in your life
Mm-hmm.
to just talk to them about knowing their values, knowing their space, understanding the tricky and trusted person,
Mm-hmm.
um, just knowing when to say no and
Right.
when to go ask for help. Then we have our range of prevention programs,
Mm-hmm.
our early childhood prevention program, our primary, and then our secondary. Our secondary is launching, I think, by the time this podcast is out, it will be
Mm-hmm.
launched.
Oh, nice.
So that
Yeah.
means kindergarten through grade 12,
It's all covered.
it's all covered.
Mm.
And it's covered, each program kind of runs with starting on values and child rights.
Mm-hmm.
They'll move into, um, depending on it, the last two, the primary and secondary, we'll talk about migration, safe migration, false job opportunities,
Mm.
and then it'll go into the human trafficking, exploitation. Um, the older grades will talk about relationship boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
while the younger grades will talk about that tricky and trusted person,
Mm-hmm.
or, where is your bathing suit area, or no,
Mm-hmm.
no square. These
Mm-hmm.
are,
Right. New terms. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So they kind of, and we build it that way to say the foundation is values and rights.
Yeah.
What I
That's
said
good.
earlier, if
Mm-hmm.
you have been told your whole life you're worthless, you have no value, no one's going to listen, you don't have
That's
a
right.
right or a legal right,
You have
then
to start there.
you
Mm-hmm.
have to start there. And then we scaffold up.
Yeah.
So those are those programs. They're filled with games,
Mm-hmm.
activities. It's all play based,
Mm-hmm.
immersive learning. It is very much designed to be run if you have zero um, resources
Mm-hmm.
or you have all the resources in the
Mm.
world. I've worked with some schools that have done stop motion
Mm.
and they'll do little animation of what trafficking might look like.
Mm-hmm.
And then in other areas, we'll just do a skit.
Yeah.
We just act it out
Mm-hmm.
because the idea is some of the most vulnerable communities, they're not going to have the most high tech
Resources. Yeah.
resources. And we don't want an activity to be limited to your access to wealth or resources.
Mm-hmm.
It can be run anywhere. And I have personally run all of these programs and every activity
Mm-hmm.
in 5 continents,
Wow.
4,
And
5.
they're free.
They're free.
And they're in multiple different languages.
Yes.
So this is, if you're here in the United States or
Yep.
have family or know people all around the world,
Yep.
these are resources that
And they're
are available.
contextualized. So they will have the hotline number of the local country that
Mm.
you're in. So in the US, it'll have a US hotline number.
Mm-hmm.
It'll talk about, if we're talking about scenarios with locations, it'll have maybe something recognizable for the child.
Mm-hmm.
We have different languages, and we are always working on creating more languages.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with our parent guides and our educator guides and
Mm-hmm.
digital safety guides.
Mm-hmm.
These are shorter, 6 to 8-ish pages,
Right.
very much targeted on a topic, multiple languages contextualized to the local
Mm-hmm.
area that they're being used.
Mm-hmm.
And those ideas are like, people are overwhelmed with a 100-page document. If you're
Mm-hmm.
not an educator, maybe you don't want to pick up a
Mm-hmm.
huge document
Right.
to run these programs.
Right.
But you're more comfortable with a 6-page, how do I have conversations with my child about digital safety?
Yeah.
And we have a page that says conversation starters
That's good.
or discussing these topics.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll unpack like what's appropriate and what's not, or for that
Mm-hmm.
age, or,
Right.
red flags and indicators.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if you don't know what you're looking for, you're going to miss it.
Right.
And so a lot of our safety guides unpack just the basic
Mm-hmm.
starter pack almost of
Right.
what you can do.
I love that. And we're going to link all of that in our show notes because I know these are resources that our listeners can take and do right now. Like
Yeah.
these are very practical guides that can help keep your family safe. So if someone's listening, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, or a teacher, there's resources that you guys have created that would really, can take it and run. And I know there's one amazing resource that we're excited to be able to have on the show next week. And so I want you to tell us a little bit more about the Global Freedom Summit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Global Freedom Summit, super exciting, launched in October 2025.
Okay.
And this is just under an hour. It is a broadcast. You can jump on and watch, and you hear experts from our team and experts from other organizations and survivors come and tell their story. They talk about what human trafficking is. This particular Global Freedom Summit is also about online child sexual exploitation. So we talk about what human trafficking is, what online child sexual exploitation is, what are the key indicators. So what are you looking for? We talk about stories of hope and stories where prevention has occurred and it's been successful. We have survivors come and share their stories. We have Sonia Ryan, who's the founder of Carly Ryan Foundation, share her story. And her daughter was killed by a perpetrator and an online groomer. And so you hear from every angle of what horrific things can happen when this with this crime, as well as what you can practically do
to stop it.
We don't want to overwhelm people watching this with this is everything bad that can happen and there's no hope, because that's not the industry we're in. We want to equip people with tools. We want them to know, okay, if I'm worried, what do I do? Where do I go? Who do I call? What resources are out there? NECMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, are on there. They talk about what they do, and they do some incredible stuff. And they have a reporting line that's 24/7, and they have take it down that you can upload images, and there's a whole range of things that they'll unpack in much more detail. But it's trying to give hope to often a hopeless situation of what can actually be done. And there's a call to action after it. What can you do in your own community? And that could be downloading one of the programs and running it. It could be looking at what's in your local community and figuring out how to support it. It could be setting some stricter digital safety rules in your household and checking in with your kids. And it could be a range of different things. But yeah, it is very exciting, and I'm so glad that you guys are showing it.
I think this is going to be a gift for our listeners. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of human nature to just want to put our head in the sand and not have to face things that are this dark. But like we said earlier, that does not solve the problem. And there are solutions. There are things that each one of us can do. And so I want to give you an opportunity. It's Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Is there any nugget of hope or truth or encouragement you want to give to our listeners today?
Yeah. I would say something that we say at A21 all the time is, we may not be able to help everyone, but everyone is able to help someone. When you look at something, 49.6 million people, and that's an estimate, it could be so much bigger. When you look at that, we are dwarfed by the issue, and that's overwhelming. And you think about, okay, well, I don't have this degree, or I don't have that education, or I don't know how to do this. What can I do? You, like we've been saying, you're the expert in your own home. You are connected to people that I will never meet. And so when we bring the issue right back down to one person, one life, and how we can intervene, I mean, that's enormous. But essentially, when you think about the ripple effect one person can have, you think about anyone you know in your life who, has done something extraordinary, and how it's impacted you and how it's impacted many people. Or think of a famous person or a historical person. Someone's gone out on a limb. And when we think of our founder, well, she heard about an issue when she was traveling, and she just went, I have to do something. 17 years ago, she said, I have to do something. One person.
Right.
And now we're a global organization with people around the world fighting this because someone acted on, And I think, okay, we don't all have to go out and start our own organization and have global impact. But if you have this inkling that there's someone in your family that could hear a little bit more about what trafficking is, or, they're acting a little bit down lately and maybe you want to chat to them, or, you've got a kid and you want to read this storybook and you want to invest into the future generation, you can do that. And, when you think about how I started right at the beginning, how did I get into this? One person from one organization came to my school and they shared. And I was fortunate not to be in a situation where I'm disclosing harm and abuse, but I was one of those kids whose life was radically changed a different way because I was moved with what they were sharing. And so many people on our team are the same. They heard our founder speak, or they heard someone from A21 speak, or they heard about the issue and like, I have to do something. And you can make massive difference just in your own community. So I would just encourage all of your listeners to don't think about how big the issue is and what you can't do. Think about what you can do, even if it's the tiniest thing, whether it's supporting the work that's going around, because some people are in that position, whether it's volunteering and giving up time, or giving a resource, or just educating yourself, so that if you're ever in a situation, you know what to do. I think every little thing works as a ripple effect, and
That's right.
was it one little pebble you drop can have a huge impact.
I love that. So good. Steph, thank you so much for all that you're doing. And I can't wait. One day in heaven, we're going to see the ripple effect of you and the way that God has wired your brain, and the creativity and the passion, and how many lives have been changed as a result of your work. So
Thank you.
yeah. All right, friends. Well, I hope what you have heard today is that there's something that you can do today, and that we don't have to wait. We don't have to wait for another kid to be harmed before we can do something. We can start protecting people right now just by reducing vulnerability before exploitation ever begins, and that is with prevention. So the enemy preys on vulnerability, but we get to stand in the gap. We get to be the ones that notice, that teach, that listen, that speak up, and that support those like allies who are on the front lines. And so God has placed you in your home, in your community, in your school, and in your relationships on purpose, and you have influence. And so it's time to do something. So we have linked some of the resources that Steph talked about today in the show notes for you, so you can start having some of these prevention conversations right now. And something I'm super excited about is this partnership that A21 and Allies is having in order to really strengthen the prevention work that we are already doing with more than 26,000 vulnerable youth through the Allies mentoring program. So A21 is going to be equipping our mentors with even more updated training and research tools to keep our kids safe and make our programs even stronger all across the globe. So if you want to be a part of this mission and help protect more vulnerable children, visit alliesyouth.org. And don't forget, next week, we're going to be airing the A21 Global Freedom Summit. And this is such a powerful resource that will really help you better understand the online sexual exploitation that Steph mentioned and what kids are really facing today, and give you some practical things you can do to help keep the people in your life safe. So friends, thank you so much for believing that change is possible and for wanting to be a part of it. One empowered life truly can change another. So let's be those people. See you next week.